Last year.
Have your attention, please. Thank you. Sorry for the delay here, but let's get started. Welcome to the Appropriations Committee. My name is Rob Clements. I'm from Elmwood and I represent Legislative District 2, which is Cass County and Eastern Lancaster County. I serve as chair of this committee. We'll start off by having the members do self-introductions, starting with my far right.
Steve Erdman, District 47.
Lauren Lippincott, District 34.
Tony Vargas, District 7.
Anna Wishart, District 27.
Mike O'Donnell, LD5, Saldomo.
Robert Dover, District 19.
Myron Horn, District 30.
Christy Armendariz, District 18.
Assisting the committee today is Corey Beerbaum, our committee clerk. To my left is our fiscal analyst, Keisha Patent. Our page today is Ellie Locke, a UNL pharmacy student from Stanton, Nebraska. If you're planning on testifying today, please fill out a green testifier sheet located in the back of the room and hand it to the page when you come up to testify. If you will not be testifying but want to go on record as having a position on a bill being heard today, there are yellow sign-in sheets on the left side of the room where you may leave your name and other pertinent information. These sign-in sheets will become exhibits in the permanent record after today's hearing. To better facilitate today's hearing, I ask that you abide by the following procedures. Please silence your cell phones. Move to the front chairs to testify when your bill or agency is up. When hearing bills, the order of testimony will be introducer, agencies, proponents, opponents, neutral, and closing. When you come to testify, spell your first and last name for the record before you testify. Be concise. We request you limit your testimony to 3 minutes or less for the general public. We will not limit agency representatives. But request you be precise. Written material may be distributed to the committee members as exhibits only while testimony is being offered. Hand them to the page for distribution when you come up to testify. If you have written testimony but do not have 12 copies, please raise your hand now so the page can make copies for you. With that, we are today combining the hearings for LB2 and LB3. We will proceed in agency number order and with the agencies in LB2, with only agency representatives testifying at that time. After the LB2 agency testimony, we will invite other agencies. Then we will invite public testimony. We expect this to be a fairly long day. We will take a lunch break from 12 to 1 p.m. And with that, we will begin with the governor's budget representative, Mr. Will. Welcome.
Here, sir.
Yes.
Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee, my name is Lee Will, Leewill, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the state of Nebraska. I'm appearing today on behalf of Governor Pillen in support of LB2 and LB3. As part of the property tax reform effort, the budget package introduced during the special session is a commitment to all Nebraskans that the state will continue to do more with less. Code agencies have worked with our office and Epiphany Associates to identify where existing expenditures reside and whether we are receiving a return on investment. In far too many instances, contracts entered with vendors have defined activities but no measured outcomes to the populations they serve. The state must continue to evaluate things that we have done yesterday to improve in the future. The guiding principle for these reductions must be improve services while reducing costs. We must make certain that we do not do these items in reverse order to ensure the high quality delivery of services. An analysis of general fund expenditures was conducted across every state agency to determine the historical and current level of spending. We took into account potential projects and increased investment for future years. It also considered which agencies can right-size their fee structures to ensure the general taxpayer is not subsidizing these user fee-based programs. In total, the recommendation includes a reduction of carryover funding of $116.7 million from FY24 to 25. It also provides for an ongoing general fund appropriation reduction of $83 million annually. Governor Pillen frequently shares that Nebraska is going to get more than its fair share of federal funding to the state. With this decision, it has provided significant opportunities to leverage federal dollars to reduce the general fund burden. An example of this is $32.5 million that was provided to the state as part of LB 1087, the Hospital Assessment Program Bill. This allowed for a direct offset in HHS general fund expenditures. We are committed to this approach in the future and believe that it will provide substantial opportunities to reduce general fund costs. The recommendation also targets interest accruals from most cash and revolving funded agencies to the general fund. This is on an ongoing basis and will provide nearly $40 million in funding each year. The recommendation is simple. It is our view that nearly every agency must contribute to the effort of tax reform to ensure that we can thrive and grow as a state. We must also look at our reserves that currently sit at $2 billion at the end of this year between the general and cash reserve fund. The recommendation relies on $235 million from the cash reserve fund between transfers to the military department and general fund. Even with these transfers and other obligations, the general and cash reserve fund is estimated to have over $900 million in funding. Testifying after me is Kristen Cox with Epiphany Associates and agency representatives from the Crime Commission, Corrections, Fire Marshal, and HHS, who can answer more in-depth questions about the impact on their respective organizations. I want to express my gratitude to the committee for doing the people's work to assist in delivering transformational relief to Nebraskans. I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? Senator Dorn?
Thank you for being here, Lee. Well,
Sure.
very much. Some of the proposals that have been brought forward, these are more news articles than anything we read, where they may have some, I call it federal impact. We may have some of what we're proposing here may have an impact on some federal funds we get. What is your take on that? Or there aren't any, or could you go over that concept?
We want to make sure that we're not cutting federal fund match. There was one provided to us with Game and Parks. I believe that they need $100,000 in their general funds to provide for a match within their grants. So we'd want to work with the committee to make sure that they have that. But that's really the only one that I've been aware of that we would potentially jeopardize a match in regards to general funds.
Well, the only reason I ask is last year we had one that, and I don't remember
The
what it
game
was.
fund. Yeah, that's fair.
Was quite an impact.
Yeah.
And then when you read the articles, shouldn't read the articles, but I do.
That's first mistake, sir.
Then it said that there were some impacts or whatever. And so,
Yeah.
but you believe there's only just the one, I guess that's
Yeah,
my question.
and we went through and carved out those specific funds that had those match or weren't entitled to savings for the general fund. Like we carved out the game fund, we carved out Perkins County Canal because that's already going to the North Omaha project, road construction projects. We tried to go with a fine tooth comb to itemize those cash funds that would have a match issue. So I don't think we have that issue anymore. Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Vargas?
Thank you. In the testimony, it includes, it provides for an ongoing general fund appropriation reduction of $83 million annually.
Yes.
Later on, you talk about the interest accrual transfers from revolving funds to the general fund, and you say that's $40 million of funding each year. Is that $40 million? Is that half of the $83 million?
Oh,
is that what you're talking about?
Great question. So the $83 million is in relation to appropriation reduction.
Okay, so
And
base
then
funding appropriation
Yes,
productions.
the other $40 million is proceeds or revenue that will come into the general fund that previously would have been credited to those cash funds or revolving funds.
But you're not accounting that for the $83 million reduction.
It's in addition to that.
It's in addition.
Yes.
Okay. And when you looked at general fund appropriation reduction, the question that I've been asked recently is, why are certain agencies and some agencies being targeted for base fund
Yep.
reductions and others are not?
Great question.
There's a base fund reduction being
Yep.
proposed for the legislature, but there's not a base fund reduction, pros for the governor's
Yep.
budget or the governor's office. And I don't have an answer for them. I wanted to see, why,
Yeah.
what's the difference here?
So I think you have to look at every, I went through and looked at base appropriation, reappropriation, and expenditures, and you have to see, is an agency actually spending their base appropriation first to eat into their carryover? In the governor's instance, they're pretty close into eating that base appropriation and hitting into that carryover. Legislative council is not. The other thing I would also offer is the governor took a 0% increase over these last 2 years in regards to appropriation.
We've had conversations here, and I'll get to the question about when we tell agencies and we provide them with a budget, and they're requesting funds for, operations, for FTEs, for things that they do. The concern has been if they don't use their funds, that we're telling them, we will cut your funds, we will take away your revolving funds, we won't lapse your funds over. Is the intent to tell agencies, use everything that we appropriate to you in every single year? And that's how we're moving forward here, not to be fiscally conservative each year, because there are agencies that are very conservative, spend less than what they're appropriated, and then we allow them to carry over. Is this a new push? Is this a new, change or goal or metric that we're pushing from state government?
I don't know if it's different because, as you're aware, Senator, at the end of every biennium, agencies that do not spend their general funds will lapse it back to the general fund. So, there's really no difference if we have this process versus naturally having it lapse back to the general fund.
Well, what they often request reappropriations and relapses from us to be able to fund, different things.
That does happen with the Legislative Council and Governor, but and Supreme Court off the top of my head. But in almost every instance, there is no reappropriation provided aside from those agencies. But I will tell you, we're going to right size the budget on how we feel expenditures are without cutting services. But I don't think it's our goal to have agencies spend every dollar that they're appropriated.
And I know there'll be people that testify in support and opposition on this, because there are different cash funds and revolving funds that are different. People would say that it is not, they shouldn't be taking that. Now, in times in the past, we have taken money from these cash funds in downturns. When we have economic downturns, we use it to backfill or the cash reserve or to offset the general fund. But I still want to know more about the rationale from the governor's office.
Sure.
If we take away these revolving funds and cash funds and the interest, when we have an economic downturn, where do we turn?
So I will say, and it's not part of this budget package, but I did go through the fund summary by fund report and go through every state cash fund. And I don't want to scare folks in the room, but I could probably recommend about $150 million to $200 million tomorrow that we could sweep from excess cash fund balances. So I don't think we broke every acorn we didn't uncover in regards to this budget. I think there's other opportunities with downturns that we left in the budget.
I appreciate that. I think there have been proposals to take those funds. We just work to not make sure we take all those funds, but thanks for answering my questions.
No problem, sir.
Other questions from the committee? I had one that was looking at the Securities Act cash fund transfers that you're proposing in the fiscal office. Was looking like with using the 2024 revenue, that would go negative in 2028. Have you projected out?
One, I would say it's very difficult to go out to 2028. I will say also in securities that the balances have been going up as people trade more, as trades are free, the securities fund is going to go up. We also have, 2 to 4 years of the ability of making adjustments in those transfers if absolutely necessary. So we work with our agency directors to kind of right size what they believe in banking that fund would be at. And, I think that they'll have enough money there, but if absolutely necessary, we can make an adjustment.
All right. So we'll take a look at that. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, we'll welcome Kristen Cox.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for
Welcome.
having me. My name's Kristen Cox and with Epiphany Associates. I'll spend just a little bit of time talking about our approach and methodology. There's a lot of things we
Would
could
you
go.
spell your name, please?
Oh, sure. Thank you. KRISTENCOX.
Thank you.
Just quick history on me. Was the budget director for the state of Utah for 8 years and then served on the cabinet of other governors prior to that. 3 governors, in fact, and worked reformed federal bureaucrat, et cetera. So I've been in government for a long time, but what probably has informed my approach as much as those things is my own journey through government as I went blind and being case managed and understanding how difficult these systems are to navigate for the people who need the services and sometimes are very vulnerable. So that highly informs our approach, and I hope that manifests itself as I talk through this today. I find your jobs incredibly difficult. The question is, there is endless demand for services, and there's just finite resources. And how do you know where to invest? It can feel, quite frankly, quite overwhelming. And we're really good in government at tracking costs using traditional cost allocation methods, which are great. Gives us the healthy financial, are we bringing in enough money? Are we spending it? But what we can't see in traditional cost accounting are the causes of cost. And these are very hidden. They're not, you can't see them in your strategy. You can't see them in most of your data systems. You can't see them in your budget. And these deeper causes of cost are always connected to poor service delivery. People not getting the service when they need it, delays, things stuck in the system, rework, quality issues. And yes, you can do some process improvement things around the margins and take off a 2% here or there. But the real causes of cost are always connected to how well government delivers high quality services. Because we get into this false choice. On one hand, we think we've got to invest more or maintain budgets to provide high quality services for the customers we serve. But on the other hand, we want to protect the taxpayer, show high return on investment, and respect the hardworking dollars earned by taxpayers. And so we get into a false choice that it's either or. And what we can do is shift the problem to one side, to the customer suffers if we cut too deeply or in the wrong place, or we shift it to the taxpayer to not have a good return on investment. And if I maybe see bold, I think great leadership does not fall into false choices, because ultimately everything in government is made up. Our policies, our procedures, our data platforms, our IT, our performance evaluations, even accounting. These are manifestations of how we think, and our systems are perfectly designed today to give us the results we have. So we have a thinking problem, and it starts with not falling victim to false choices. So how do we break it? For us, more value for every dollar invested is huge, and that manifests in different ways. You'll see in our report 7 different strategies, but the one that can be sometimes the hardest to get our heads around is how do we actually cut costs? And we say, by improving services is how you reduce costs. And this is very counterintuitive. So we use a systems lens approach. I could spend 4 days on this concept as well. It's simple, but not easy. By the way, I think complexity is easy. What is really hard is simple, clear impact. That is hard. So let me just give you a little sense of our framework. I'll walk you through it. We can walk through an example, then open for questions. Systems thinking can be very theoretical, and it can be actually really challenging work to do. But at its core, what we're asking is, what are we supposed to be delivering? And we talk about primary customer and primary needs. It's very easy for us, and I've been in government, to drift into secondary needs. For example, we'll spend more time trying to simplify an application, even though it still takes months to get a decision made. Or we'll do a reorganization to have a one-stop, even though the person still can't get a job. We can drift to very simple secondary needs, but those fundamental obligations, is a kid safe, free from abuse and neglect, and not taking 2 years plus to get done. Can we deliver on that before we do all the nice to haves? What's interesting, the first page you'll see here is very common when we go into organizations from IT systems to portfolio projects and initiatives. We'll see this distribution all the time. A small percent is on primary customer, primary need. And even then, it's not fully baked. You usually have half-baked solutions going in there, and the execution is problematic. I'll show you some operational issues in a second. You've got another big column on secondary needs, single sign-on, all the kind of stuff that feels great, but it's not penetrating what matters for the person at the end of the day. We'll see a lot on compliance. And look, this is never a blame on people. The systems are promoting behaviors that often don't make sense. People are overwhelmed, they're working so hard, and they have a lot of compliance stuff coming at them. A lot of stuff in compliance, and then internally focused, I need a new data system, I need my new IT, doesn't translate to customer outcomes. So we have so much time and effort not going into that fundamental obligation. That by itself is wasted effort, hence why we started with infrastructure systems, IT, procurement, cost, these things that cut across all of your agencies. And we want to shore those up first to ensure people stay focused on the most high impact projects. When we started in child welfare, there was 93 projects in play. First question is, could your leadership bring like this fast all their initiatives? That's number one. Do we even know what's going on in our agencies? But of those 93, 4 were going to move the needle. So the amount of time and energy chasing things that you cannot see in the budget is significant. We have a whole thing called work and process controls. We won't get into that, but we start with that. Now, we don't just start with that as a theory for, let's say, child welfare. Our kids free from abuse and neglect quickly into a permanent safe situation. That is key. We've got to deliver on that. Now, that tells us something else, which are what are all the processes, parts, functions, IT, policy, data systems that have to play together to deliver on that outcome. What happens, I think, public enemy number one in government is a concept called local optimization. It manifests in our budgets, in our operations, in our measurements, and it's crushing the ability for government to make impact. So let's look at your next slide. Do you guys have all these pieces of paper? Or am I just talking to the air?
We do.
Okay. You never know in my world. So I want you to, this is very simple. I understand this, but it manifests the principle that is true in every type of work environment. You can see a simple flow. We're seeing this today in long-term care, child welfare. You'll see it in every system. A, B, C, D, E. These could represent different functions. It could represent intake in child welfare, and then it goes into investigations, and then to service delivery, et cetera. So you can see across the system, right? All of these things have to work together. And this is the difference. Systems thinking is about how do the parts work together. Traditional analytic thinking is about how does each part work separately. We try to optimize each part, right? Optimize IT to the fact that even if it may not make a difference. So you can see here, A can do 20 units, B can do 16, C can do 10, D can do 18, E can, A, B, C, D, E can do 24. Yeah. So in this system, where do you improve? There's problems everywhere in government, but I would say most problems aren't worth solving. If we don't know how to detect the problem, we can chase a lot of effort. So for example, you could put a lot of time and energy on A and do a process improvement initiative, et cetera, and get A from going 20 units to 40 units an hour. But the system itself can only produce as much as C is capable of producing. The system is only going to perform at the level of its constraint. C here can produce 10. It doesn't matter what you do up front. In fact, you can make the system worse. We do this. We'll see. If you've ever been in the fast food, they just create more lines, but there's only one person taking the order. This will happen in our systems all the time. We start improving at the wrong place, and we actually make things worse for the constraint. Now, finding the constraint in systems are all operational practices. It's hard work. It's not easy. We're not taught how to do this in government usually, but is where you get simple but high impact, when you can find and detect it and manage the system around the constraint and focus your energy there. So this is how you improve quality, because think if you're somebody moving through the system and you're stuck at B and you can't progress. You can't get into services. There's a wait list. There's rework. You have to get into more information. That a lot of times you'll see call centers, half of the time it's status calls, where's my case? Which is pulling away from C, the ability of the constraint to process the application. They're taking status calls. So this is a very simple but very challenging principle to implement. But in government, we manage vertically. A new program, we talk about silos. All we do is reorg the silos. You have to integrate at the flow, at the horizontal. What's moving across all the programs? And when you figure that out, you can find the constraint and actually remove delays, which cost money in the system. And I'll show you this for example in child welfare, and improve quality, right? So that I don't have rework. So this is the trick in systems thinking, is to move into horizontal management, not vertical management. You need both. It's really hard to do. So that's the first piece. We've got to focus on primary customer, primary needs. Second, we have to understand all the parts that come together to make that happen. And there's a lot you can do with that. So there's a huge opportunity cost when we don't get this right. It was really interesting when we went to your child welfare system and you asked the front line, who are heroes, how much time do you get to spend actually doing the job you were hired to do? What do you think? They'll tell you 15, 20%. So think of that wasted capacity of these folks who want to make an impact on the front line, because if we do not even control how much work and change, and we're not focused on the constraint, and we just introduce endless initiatives, these folks on the front line can't do the job. And when they can't do it well, the customer suffers. This is all about quality. These are about hidden capacity that we just can't see. Our trick is making the invisible visible so we can see it, except for I don't see it, but you can all see it. So let me go to one more example in child welfare quickly, and then we can talk through some numbers here. This is a very, this will be your fourth piece of paper. Does it say child welfare? Yes. Okay.
The child welfare map we have.
Thank you, sir. This is a very high level example. We start high level. You build a blueprint for a house before you choose what carpet you want. When we in government don't know what to do, we dig into the details too quickly. And we start doing local optimization, fixing A, fixing B, fixing D, but not fixing the system. And we start reinforcing all of this local optimization and complexity in our systems. What we do is we start at a very high level. What's the blueprint? How should these parts work together? And then we go deep, deep into it. You can see here in child welfare, a very simple flow. There's intake, a report, it's substantiated, it goes into case management, service delivery, et cetera, and then hopefully a successful reunification. What was interesting when we started this, when you look at baseline performance, inflation adjusted between 2021 and 2023, is a 6% increase in budget. By the way, it's interesting to know where the budget's going up. It's not just in your categories of expenditure. That's not going to tell you enough. Is it going up in your admin, overhead, indirect costs, management, new IT systems? Is it going up in provider? Where's the money going? So we actually organize budgets around indirect, direct, and direct aid. Are we bloating the bureaucracy and not getting any return on investment? So in child welfare, a 6% inflation adjusted increase in 2 years was serving 4% fewer kids. But the time to permanency, which is key, was going up by 108 days. This is the worst case scenario. More money going in, worse outcomes. And when we believe money is the answer, what we believe, the assumption is that we're doing as good as we can. The systems is totally working well. I've never been in one system. I've lost count. I've been in over 300. I lost count after that. Haven't seen a system yet that didn't have hidden capacity to do better for the people they serve, both the taxpayer and the customer. What you'll find here is, for example, think in this system. If a family and a kid need services, the most critical thing we can do is get them those services. Guess what we never measure in these systems? Time to first service. It could take 60 days plus just to get a plan. And who knows after that? And so what does that mean? Every day, a family and a kid are stuck in this system is on average $2,700 a day. So when you reduce the delays because that's what's good for families and kids, not to have them bouncing around in foster care for 2 years, you actually save money. And you save money by doing the right thing. We say you have to do the right thing effective, then you do the right thing well, efficient, in that order. And cost savings is a byproduct. And government, once it can get a handle on this, and it's hard, this is hard to move this Titanic. And we never, ever recommend taking money out of direct services until the improvements are made, right? We never do that. In fact, in this instance, we've actually recommended that a portion of those savings be considered for reinvestment up front, for in-home. all the stuff. And you get into these really great cycles when you
I'm
start
going
doing
to
it.
ask you to have some closing remarks.
Yep. So there you go. I will wrap it up. But here's the final piece on this. There's huge hidden capacity in these systems, but we do not have the tools to detect it. And we can start actually by committing to a systems approach, get better outcomes for those we serve while saving taxpayer dollars. I've seen it time and time again. With that, I'll open up for questions.
Other questions from the committee? Senator Wishart.
First of all, thank you so much for being here today. I thought that was very impressive, so thank you. I am familiar with Utah's budgeting process because I followed the work they did when they needed to build a new prison. Were you in the budget office at that time?
Yes, but I came in after that decision about the prison and the budget were done.
Okay. In terms of one of the things that we have struggled with from the appropriations perspective is oftentimes when we invest in technology software, it actually ends up costing more. And it's always felt a little backwards that if you're investing in an IT system, wouldn't that end up creating efficiencies? Can you explain a little bit from your experience where states have done it right in terms of investing in technology?
You are a kindred spirit on this. We call it called pre-IT. Before it should even go to technology, you need to figure out the operational issues, the system issues, the measurement problems you may have, any policy constraints. Then and only then do you know what problem you're solving for. Half the challenge in IT is getting really clear on the problem. And then you can bring in forward a technical solution. Too often we jump to IT. I was in a state, they had just set up a $60 million new IT system for unemployment insurance. And actually baselining after it, they were 18% worse when you looked at the cost per decision, because these system issues had not been worked through. And that's why we looked at IT first. It's gone amok in this country. We often think IT is a solution. It can be powerful. I'm not against IT, but we can actually over-engineer the IT and not get the impact that we need. So totally agree with you on that.
Okay, and then one follow-up question to that. From your experience, is it more beneficial for a state to look at funding sort of an external private entity to do that IT work or building in-house? We wrestle with this quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say even before that is, how do you know if IT is working? And often we measure it with scope, schedule, budget, or actually think we really should be looking at speed to value. And when you start taking IT, because part of systems thinking is to align all the functions, including IT, to the system goal. So how do you know at the beginning that it's even going to be beneficial? And so when we put the IT cost within the denominator of the system, right? So you have a system, let's say unemployment insurance, and you're going to build a 30 million new IT system. It's a life cycle of 10 years, 10 million years plus ongoing maintenance, let's say 4 million, 14 million a year. That should now tell us for $14 million, what are we getting out of that? Are we faster? Is our quality better? And then you can make a decision based off, can I get that done cheaper through in-house or a vendor? That becomes a very secondary, tertiary question, but it's once we understand the problem, we do the pre-IT, we understand the baseline cost, then you can actually have a competitive bid that tells you where the best value is. And we can go into a lot more detail on that, but that's the theory.
Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Vargas?
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your testimony. A couple questions. So in the spirit of transparency for
Yes,
this, please remind me, what's the dollar amount for your contracted services for doing this work
Yes.
for Epiphany?
Total transparency, I'm sure you've already seen it. The first year, it's about 2.4, and then it goes up for 2 years to about 288,000 a month, to just over 3 million. And then the fourth year, it goes way down because our goal is to build infrastructure within the state so you can kick us out. I don't want to be an ongoing vendor. This is work that I feel passionate and love it. And our goal is to make and help build that infrastructure within the state so that it becomes very self-sufficient. Our contract, though, has very clear deliverables, which we have met and will continue to make. Very tangible. You can measure it or you can't.
And so what is the 288,000 a month increase? What is the rationale behind that in the contract?
Sure. It's, well, just to get to the report where we did, we've probably had over, between probably 13 and 16 different people on the ground looking at your IT systems, your procurement systems, doing budget stress testing to understand your rainy day balance and idle funds, all the stuff. This year, those resources will maintain, and we'll bring a few additional people in now that we're deeper into operations. So it's really, most of it is for staffing.
Okay. Second, your metrics, your contracted metrics is the main metric, what I'm trying to understand, because I agree. I think we talk about this a lot. We talk about efficiency a lot. We talk about spending less. We've done this for years. We've worked in hand with the governor's office, even if it does or does not feel that way all the time. We do. And we tend to agree on about 90% of the things in terms of, and Lee Will's nodding, so good affirmation. Not trying to blow smoke up, so, but in that same vein, is your performance indicators about cutting costs?
And if I say this once, I'm going to say a million times. We, number one, if you look at the contract itself, in fact, phase 2 is about improving quality up to 25%. And we 100% believe that you cannot have breakthrough in cost reductions unless you improve quality. You can't do it. And that is 100%. When you look at our contract language, phase 2 is a 25% increase in quality and throughput, which is the capacity for the system to meet demand.
This is probably where I have a hard time, because I agree that more money, what you said is the assumption is that more money doesn't always help people. And I think that's an assumption that we try not to take here in the committee. That's not always the case, right? The more money doesn't always help people, but it's also less money doesn't always help people.
Correct. And that's where you have to know where to take it.
Yes. And as part of your testimony, talking about the amount of contracted services that don't have metrics, you said was very, very high.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at cutting those costs, why are we not improving and creating metrics for contracted services and then working with those entities to actually enact on those?
We actually
on those
are.
goals?
Part of the report, if you look at the implementation guide, it starts with just improving the flow of contracts, doing what's called a pre-agreement tool, screening out contracts that don't have good ROI or an outcome isn't verbalized. And then we're moving into what's called value-based procurement. It's a vehicle in the procurement field that actually helps reduce the burden on vendors. It creates a more competitive environment, but it also attaches to outcomes. So with the new administrator over procurement in play, that is part of this phase right now, moving to value-based procurements to help shift the model into something you can measure. That's a win for the vendors with reduced paperwork and all the overhead, faster procurements, but also high impact for customers and taxpayers.
And have you worked or connected with the auditor's office? And the reason why I ask before you answer is, there have been recent reports looking at, child subsidies, even child welfare, and sort of to Senator Wishart's point, like technology can improve and be more efficient. And sometimes we have to spend money to be able to find those efficiencies. We've done it in the past, but it found that there were just clear, egregious lack of oversight over, the Enfocus system, for example.
Yeah,
and
we've been deep in the Enfocus system.
Yes. So, our auditor, thankfully has been doing a lot of this work on the back end, but it was very, very clear in his report that we have to improve our oversight mechanism and our technology.
Yeah.
And that does require new technology. It does require some money and efficiencies in that money, but are you collaborating with them? What does that look like?
I have talked to your state auditor actually, and he had some interesting ideas, which I thought were fascinating. I think the issue with Enfocus, if you look at our IT strategy, or it's full forward, pre-IT, don't move it forward until you figure out your operational policy, business performance measures. Tell me how you measure me and I'll tell you how I behave. You put in weird performance measures in your systems, which we see in these IT systems all the time, it perverts the behavior. Number 2, once it's in, you actually have to improve flow. And IT has its own flow issues as anyone else. And if you get command and control over that, you can actually get more projects done over the period of time. You also have some issues in your state with very expensive IT vendors. Not vendors like Butts and Body Shop, contractors, and your new CIO with us is working on that. And there's some other issues going on, but we're aligned on that. IT can be powerful, but it can also create a lot of damage if we don't put it in correctly. And you'll notice in our report, one of the biggest levers we're looking at is IT, so that we can improve outcomes while reducing costs. So I think we're aligned on that.
Okay. Well, thank you, and I appreciate you being here.
Yep, thank
Any
you.
other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your
Thank
testimony.
you. Appreciate it.
We're going to move on to in our agency order here. We have Legislative Council. Chairman Aguilar. Welcome, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Senator Ray Aguilar, spelled R-A-Y-A-G-U-I-L-A-R, and I represent the 35th Legislative District. I'm here today before you as Chair of the Executive Board to testify in a neutral capacity on the proposed changes in LB2 to the budget for Agency 3, the Legislative Council. While the Executive Board has not taken a formal position on the bill, members met on Friday to discuss the bill and express significant concerns regarding the provisions of the bill impacting the Legislative Council budget. As introduced, LB2 makes fairly sizable cuts to two programs within the Legislative Council budget. These programs are Program 122, Legislative Services, Program 123, Clerk of the Legislature's Office. Legislative Services is the largest program within the legislature's budget, and it includes funding for the senators' per diems, salaries, and operating expenses, office supplies, printing, etc. For senators' offices, travel reimbursements, and legislative accounting and budget office, the coordinator of legislative services, and a wide variety of contracts approved by the Executive Board. The proposed cuts would include both a lapse of reappropriated funds and cuts to general fund appropriations in both programs. Because nearly 90% of the Legislative Council budget consists of staff salaries and benefits, the legislature must frequently rely on reappropriated funds to undertake major projects. For example, when the clerk's office needed to replace the video boards in the chamber in 2021, we had to rely on reappropriated funds to make this critical update. Similarly, when a delay in the HVAC project prevented us from being able to use room 1003 at the start of the 2023 session, only because of the availability of reappropriated funds were we able to convert room 1307 into a temporary hearing room for the Appropriations Committee. As committee members may be aware, the Legislative Council is already utilizing reappropriated funds to finance a variety of items in our current budget, including replacing laptop computers, staffing our video archive library, staff salary increases that went into effect on July 1, pay advancements would go into effect on January 1, contracts with outside counsel regarding the Attorney General's opinion on constitutionality of the offices of Inspector General. Reappropriated funds are currently being utilized in most of the budgetary program for operating expenses, everything except salaries and some benefits, in order to reduce the need to appropriate new general fund dollars each budget cycle. So a reduction in reappropriated fund would create a need for additional general funds down the line. While Program 122 would potentially shoulder a small one-time lapse of some reappropriated funds, the proposed cuts to ongoing general fund appropriations would significantly hamper the work of our separate branch of government. The proposed cuts to Program 123, the clerk of the legislator's office, are even more problematic. And I've asked the clerk to testify following me to address some of these issues in more detail. Within the clerk's office, there are multiple ongoing and pending projects for which funds have already been expended, which would be imperiled by the proposed cuts in Program 123. Most notably, the executive board recently approved a series of room renovations in the northeast corner of the Capitol, which would be virtually impossible should their cuts in LB2 go forward. I would be happy to try to answer any questions you have, and the clerk of the legislature will testify following me as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? Senator Wishart?
Thank you, Chairman Aguilar. And you can tell me if this is better for the clerk to answer, but can you help me understand how these cuts would impact the salary increases that we provided for staff members? Because it's my understanding that we did not increase the base funding for the Legislative Council to incorporate the salary increases. So I want to understand how, with these cuts, how we would be able to sustain the staff increases.
It's my understanding the cuts would significantly imperil the opportunity to get some of those things done.
Okay.
Other questions, Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Clements. Did I understand you right that if these cuts are approved or we bring back some of these funds, next year in the budget process, you will be asking for an increase in operations?
We would have to.
You'd
The
have
general fund budget.
general fund budget. Okay.
Senator Vargas?
I will sort of semi-attempt to answer this question too, because we've had this conversation that we will be fine for the salaries now for the increases for this biennium, but in future bienniums where we wouldn't have the funding to be able to sustain the salary increases. That's been my understanding in our conversations. Given that as a co-equal branch of government, Chairman, were you consulted to find cost savings or efficiencies from the governor's office to try to aid in this effort? Or was this something that was basically, this is the cut that we're proposing of your co-equal branch of government?
We were not.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator.
Is the clerk, representative of the clerk available? Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Brandon Metzler, BRANDONMETZLER. I will echo some of what Chairman Aguilar said. In terms of Program 123 specifically, I've had discussions with both the fiscal office and our appropriations office. Based on numbers that I've been given, the clerk's office is looking at an excess of between 600 and 900,000, certainly a $1.5 million cut. Presumably would look like we're operating at a loss. I don't know how that would be rectified, but based on the numbers that I've been given, there's some serious concerns from my office on Program 123. Mr. Chairman, I know there was some interest within the executive board discussion of looking at these, maybe even Program 123 seriously and having some discussion. So I certainly would welcome any of that. As the chairman said, many of your programs and your projects rely on those carryover funds. It's what gives you the flexibility as a co-equal branch of government in that you don't need to always, come to the Appropriations Committee. You have the ability to, restore your voting boards, restore a hearing room, projects that pop up with the media room that the executive board's working on. Some of those things are handled with these carryover funds. So by taking those funds away and depleting those down to very little. We've already relied on carryover funds last year. We are, my office in particular, we have a full-time position that was funded solely by carryover funds. That's going to be an ongoing expense that at one time, off the bat was started with reappropriated funds. So I thank you for looking at program 03, specifically 123, and I'm welcome to answer any questions.
Other questions? Senator Vargas?
Will you walk me through, how you've been finding cost efficiencies over the years and doing this saving intentionally for both rainy day and for projects?
Yeah, absolutely. And this, if I can take a step back and look even broader, one thing I want to say to the committee, my predecessor was here for a number of years. I know there are several division directors that are in the same boat as me, in that we have not had a chance to even go through a budget cycle. I have not created a budget for program 123. I haven't had the opportunity to show that I'm fiscally responsible with my budget and make cuts where I deem appropriate. So it's important to me that, I hope that the legislature considers that when they look at their division directors and say, here's some responsibility. Where can you make cuts? That directive coming from the legislative branch. As a legislative individual, I'm very passionate about the fact that the executive board, the appropriations committee, legislative leadership stepping in and saying, okay, legislative branch, it's your turn. Where can you, be fiscally responsible? But that directive coming from the legislature. In terms of what we've done, I will tell you, I planned on my next budget. There's a good chance I can make significant cuts. We've done the print on demand program, for example. We used to print copies of everything. We've gone to that print on demand and saved considerable amounts of money on printing only what we need. So we've got different programs like that. You've seen the use of IT and some of those projects that used to cost 2, 3, 4 people. We can now do in 2 people with IT, less paper, that sort of a thing. So we've certainly have looked at those and will look at those going forward. And I just hope that the legislature takes that into account.
And if you're contracted or not contracted, ICIO or other services or rates, have they increased, for us as the legislative branch?
They certainly have. We're looking at like some of our phone lines and our data service lines. We're looking at a jump in those. So when you see costs for the legislature rising, it's not always the legislature. Sometimes it's those services that we don't have independent. We still kind of piggyback off the executive branch. Sometimes those costs do come from exec branch services if those rates jump up.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
That concludes Legislative Council. Next agency is the governor. Is there a representative wanting to comment on the governor's budget? Seeing none. Lieutenant Governor's budget comments? Seeing none, we'll go on. Secretary of State would be next. Welcome, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing us to come in this morning. I want to begin by just talking about a larger view, a larger picture. I won't dwell on it for too long. The Business Services Division of the Secretary of State's office, you heard comments earlier about sweeping interest out of the revolving accounts and so forth, taking those into the general fund. The Business Services Division of the Secretary of State's office contributes about $16 million every biennium into the general fund. So the Secretary of State's office is, if you compare what we take out of the general fund for our operations and compare that with what we contribute to the general fund, we contribute many multiples of what we take out of the general fund already as we sit here today. Earlier this year, in the legislative session, there was an effort to retrieve unspent cash funds. I'm sure you recall that exercise. And the State Records Board, which the Secretary of State chairs, we contributed back $3 million from that fund of cash that I thought would be fine. We didn't object to that, and we agreed and encouraged that for the purposes that the legislature saw fit. So I don't want you to think that I'm coming in here today as someone who's unwilling to participate in this effort, who's unwilling to contribute to this effort. I'm not, nor is my office. The proposal that's been made here is something that I would ask this committee not to adopt. And I want to talk a little bit about it. If you take a look at the document that's been handed to you, there are things referred to as exhibits, but those are just parts of the same piece of paper. Exhibit A shows what was submitted to you in terms of the proposal itself. It seems like the proposal is to take $250,000 out of our elections budget each year of the 2 years of the biennium. And I don't think that's advisable. I would encourage you not to do that. When I try to understand, well, what's the basis of this? What's the basis of the proposal itself? What I see is that we have a carry forward of $691,000. You can see this in this is the lower right-hand number under fiscal year 23-24 of Exhibit A, which is the top graph. That was in the proposal. So I want to make a couple of general comments, then I'm going to come back to that number and what that represents and why I think that you ought to leave it alone for now. Many of the proposals, many of the agency evaluations carry a biennial excess line. You see this? This is the last line in a number of the recommendations for agencies. And if you take a look at that line is not present in the recommendation that was made for the Secretary of State's office. That line was left off of that. And you can see in the example here, this is another agency that, they had a biennial access of $240,000. This is Exhibit B on this sheet of paper. They had a biennial excess of $240,000 in 2021 and $421,000 in 22-23, and the proposal is to take some of that. If the biennial access line had been shown for the Secretary of State's office, you take a look at Exhibit C, and that shows you what it would have been. $187,000 in 2021, $51,000 in 22-23. There's the biennial excess for the Secretary of State's office. But the proposal is to take $500,000. Now, if you take a look at Exhibit D, what we've done is we've compared the proposal for the Secretary of State's office with 4 other agencies and how it compares, relatively speaking, to the biennial excess, the line that was not present on our proposal. And you can see the Treasurer, they're proposing to take 24% of that excess, Historical Society, none, Oil and Gas, 48%, Turk, 36%. But when it comes to the Secretary of State, they're proposing to take 489% of our biennial excess. Well, so what does that come back to? How are we to understand that? And that is, and that is to be taken from the election appropriation. Well, I want to say that if you take a look at unspent appropriations in elections over the last 3 bienniums, it's 1 or 2%. We don't have a lot of unspent appropriations in elections. in the most recent biennium was 1%. It was $20,792. So we don't have a lot of unspent excess. We have very little in elections. But if you take a look at the carry forward, we go back up to Exhibit A, there's this $691,000 figure. And the best I can surmise is that the assumption is that 691,000 will be in excess. This year it'll be in excess next year, and you can take 250,000 of that. I'm not sure the rationale. I don't know the rationale for that number specifically, but this is as close as I can come. Well, the difficulty is that $691,000 carry forward is for specific purposes that are related to voter ID and one other project, but the vast bulk of it is related to the implementation of voter ID, and it's money that the legislature appropriated for this purpose. So our office received $1.2 million in appropriations for fiscal year 24 related to implementing voter ID. That included $700,000 for public education in the primary election. And then the other 500 was for the general election. So how did it go? I'm going to talk about our spending on that in a second, but how did that go? How do we measure whether or not that money met its purpose? Well, one measure is that we had a very great understanding on the part of the voters of Nebraska in the primary election about voter ID. And we had a very good understanding on the part of our county clerks and county election commissioners about how to implement it. And we had a very good understanding on the part of our poll workers about how to implement it. And the result was that we had 200 or 250,000 people who voted at the polls in the primary election. All but 84 of them complied with the voter ID requirements at the polls. That's pretty good. And that to me is a sign. Now those people had a week to come in and show their ID. That's 84 out of 200 or 250,000 voters. That suggests to me that the voter information efforts we undertook were successful. That's some indication of that. I think it's a good indication of it because the proof's in the pudding. Now, so we take a look at what we spent of that 700,000 that you appropriated to us for this purpose. 400,000 has been spent. We have $170,000 worth of bills that will have to be paid out of that. That leaves 130,000 of that first 700. And that's money that we've held because we wanted to not spend it all and hold some of it back in case there were needs that needed to be met. And now we have some needs that need to be met because the place where we had less compliance with this were in the 11 counties that vote entirely by mail. And there was less compliance with the voter ID requirements in those areas. So what we want to do is take these funds and focus on that in a way that we hadn't initially planned. That's where we're going to focus that money if we have it. And that was our intention, is to hold some of that back. If we don't need it, by the way, I'm going to say this again later, but whatever's left over out of this goes back to the general fund on June 30th next year. So whatever we don't need and don't use, the general fund is going to get back. You don't need to take it now while we're in the process of we're in the middle of this process. In addition to that, so we have now what's going to happen in the general election is we're going to have 2 or 2.5 times more voters in this general election than we had in the primary. The primary worked out very well because it helped our entire election systems across the state get comfortable and compliant with voter ID. But now we're going to have a large influx of voters, 2 or 2.5 times the number of voters will be voting in the general election. So you have a very large number of people. This will be their first time in voting for voter ID. We have to continue these voter informational efforts, and the legislature appropriated money for that purpose, and we're going to do that. So some of these funds then will be targeted towards the areas where we saw we would like to get voters better informed, that we saw from our experience in the primary election. That's what we're doing with these funds. So when you take a look at where that comes from, then we have 170,000 of that 691. I'm going back to the 691, which is, I think, informed the proposal that's before you. And there's 170,000 bills yet to be paid. There was 130,000 we held back that we would like to commit to these areas for voter information. We did have a savings on envelopes. Now we have $50,000 that are yet to be paid on envelopes, but we also had 150, so that's 50 of that money. But we also have $150,000 in savings. And that's because the people who are involved in elections and in financial administration in the Secretary of State's office have sharp pencils and they're careful with the public fisc. They were able to negotiate a better deal. So we have savings on those envelopes. We also had savings on our voter registration contract that we negotiated, but that money is going to be needed later. It's savings up front. So what I just said accounts for about $600,000 of this amount. What will happen is at the end of the year, on June 30th next year, is whatever we have and spend, the general fund is getting back. So what I would ask is the committee's forbearance here. Let us get our work done in our elections, please. Let us get through this election and pursue things in the way that we have planned and intend. And as we have savings for the people of this state, the general fund will get that money back. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next agency is the State Treasurer's Office. Is there a representative for the State Treasurer? Just to let you know, after this will be Public Service Commission. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Clements and members of the committee. My name is Jason Walters, JASON WALTERS from Lincoln, and I'm the Nebraska Deputy State Treasurer. State Treasurer Breezy is unable to be here as he is at another hearing right now, but I am here testifying on behalf of Treasurer Breezy in favor of LB2. As I'm sure you're aware, Treasurer Breezy has worked on this issue with many of you for a number of years. He is pleased to see the plan put forth by Governor Pillen and like-minded senators that will actually help Nebraskans suffering from crushing property taxes without raising taxes on those same individuals. LB2 is an important step towards the goal of helping our fellow Nebraskans. I would like to point out that while LB2 reduces the appropriation for the State Disbursement Unit, or SDU, by $100,000, the actual cost to that program will be $250,000. For those of you who may not be aware, Nebraska has a centralized child support collection and disbursement office, which through an interagency agreement with Department of Health and Human Services is under the Nebraska State Treasurer's Office. The SDU receives a federal fund reimbursement based on the amount of state expenditures. In this case, the reduction of $100,000 in state money will result in our office seeing a reduction of $150,000 in federal funds. This reduction will not negatively impact the performance of the SDU in any way, shape, or form, and we fully expect the staff of the SDU will continue their excellent work. As stated previously, Treasurer Breezy is in full support of LB2, and I would welcome any questions that you have.
Any questions? Senator Dover?
So you're simply saying that you don't need $250,000, is that right?
We have some efficiencies that we have recognized. And we have some other things planned that are going to reduce costs. So yes, we can absorb the loss of $250,000 in total funds to the program.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Dorn?
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you for being here. So I call it the handout we get. You actually show a reduction of 100,000. But, and I asked our governor's fiscal analyst,
Yes.
Will, about this federal funds that we're using. And this one here is showing one up that we're also, the negative effect to the state of Nebraska is another 150,000 or 250,000. So your budget is actually a $250,000 loss, not the 100,000 when it shows up. We're going to be back for reduction.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, there's, the child support disbursement is part of a federal program. And so for every dollar that, or for every 40 cents, out of every dollar spent, 40 cents is state general funds and 60% is federal funds.
So in reality at all, I know on our line here, on this line, we see the handout, it shows $100,000 cost to your Secretary of State
Yeah.
Department.
Yeah.
In reality though, it's to the state of Nebraska, it's a $250,000 cost because we're now also somewhere along the line, somewhere down the road, your budget, your office will be picking up that other 150,000 cost in some kind of expense somewhere.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, I see your fiscal analyst showing, no, it's to the state of, the people of the state of Nebraska though, are gonna lose that 150,000 also.
Are you addressing the question to me or to? Yeah, so if we don't spend that money, we're not eligible for the match. So nobody's picking up the extra.
Nobody's picking up the extra. Okay.
Yes, yeah. So I misunderstood that question.
I asked it, I think, wrong. Now I understand how he explained it. So it is then officially a $100,000 cost
Yes.
to your department,
Yes.
but there's another $150,000 in funds we could have had.
There's a,
Yes.
yeah, it's a side impact that money is. So the amount of our federal grant does not change. We're just not eligible to seek reimbursement for those funds.
Thank you for that clarification very much. Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you for being here. So had this not been brought to your attention by the governor, was the treasurer's office going to make these reductions anyway?
We had not had discussions if we were going to make those or not. We'll be submitting our budget in September, but we haven't begun internal discussions on that budget. I know there is a project that was going to be, I don't know if we'll be able to do it now or not, improvement to, we operate a customer phone service system where incoming calls come in, and we've added some features to that, but there's an upgrade to that system that we would like to make. That may prevent us from doing this. That may delay it for a period of time.
So if LB 1, 2, and 3 doesn't pass, would the treasurer's office still go forward with making these cuts?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry, Senator. I have to,
Thank you.
it's ultimately a decision for the treasurer to make, but we would have a discussion about it, certainly.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Okay, thank you.
Next is Public Service Commission. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman, Senators of the committee. My name is Dan Watermeyer, spelled Watermeier. I'm here as representing the Nebraska Public Service Commission. We did not prepare any testimony. We just decided to follow through with our 2 fiscal notes. And I guess just to clarify, Chairman, is it okay if I speak about LB 2 and 3 at this time? Or
Yes,
okay, that's what
we're doing both 2
I
and
assume.
3.
Right. Just if you want to refer to anything, it'd just be the fiscal notes. LB 2 takes away $5 million out of the first 2 and second fiscal years. Just to be clear, we have already obligated the whole $20 million, 19,700,000, which lists in the fiscal note for the first fiscal year of 23-24 of the Bridge Act. So we would have to come up with dollars out of that. And I'm assuming we've been working behind the scenes whether we can actually pull that money out of the second year's obligation of our appropriation. We think we can probably do that, but it's a little bit unclear. So just so you understand, we've actually fully awarded the first year of the $19.7 million. On LB3, that deals with the interest amounts in different funds. The two biggest funds dealing in the commission would be the NUSF fund, which is around $3 million of projected interest, and then also on our 911 set-aside funds, which I think is around $350,000. That's both listed in the fiscal note. Those would be in jeopardy, both of those. I know in the past we've had, Senator McDonald's had the 211 bill, which has taken interest out of the NUSF fund and used that to pay for the 211 program. So that would be in jeopardy as well. But mainly we're just here and wanting to answer any questions if we can. I have staff with our budget department that can help maybe answer the detailed questions that you may have.
Other questions? Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you for being here, Commissioner. So to follow up on a similar question that Senator Vargas asked, were you contacted in advance about these adjustments?
No, sir.
Okay.
Senator Norton?
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you for being here. So if I understand it right, I think from the governor's proposal 2 years ago, we were going to pull 40 million out of Public Service Commission. We got hammered on the floor. That didn't happen. We were going to pull some funds out last year. Most of that didn't happen because it was obligated already. And if I understand your comments right, this has been obligated, just not dispersed. So it's not like it's money sitting there that is no need or no strings attached to it. This is obligated. And then explain a little bit about the broadband. I don't know if everybody understands the Broadband Bridge Act, but that's money that our state has put forward, approximately 20 million in several years for broadband access across the state.
Let me, if I may, clarify that just a little bit. Last year, the budget discussion about the $40 million was out the NUSF fund, which is strictly a fee-based fund. It's no general funds inside of the NUSF. So there was a constitutional questions about whether that should be appropriate or not. The Bridge Act is strictly general funds that's allocated $20 million per year to the Public Service Commission for us to hand out and grant funds. So those are general funds, and we completely understand if those would want to be backed out of the budget. And then we understand every year that's something that the Appropriations Committee decides whether we really need to have that. But to answer your question, just to be clear, going back to this biennium that we're in, we've just started the second year of the biennium. Last year, in our the first half of the biennium, we had application process, we had awarded grants of $19.7 million for that first year. So that 20 million is pretty much taken care of. The 300,000 will carry over to the next fiscal. And so we were prepared, and actually next month, starting in a couple of days, we will open up application process for the second round of the Bridge Act. So it does put it in jeopardy. I would say it does. But I understand the rationale behind it.
Other questions? I had a question.
Yes, Senator.
Regarding broadband, there's this BEAD program with quite a lot of money.
Yes.
500 million or so?
405.
400 million. Is it possible to use that instead of the Bridge Act for next fiscal year?
Well, they will be working together in conjunction, but there is a segment of the state, different stakeholders, telecoms that are not eligible for the BEAD program. They will rely on the Bridge Act and the general funds. They have different federal fundings that's available, but there is a segment of the telecoms in the state that are not going to be eligible for the BEAD program.
That's what I was really wondering, if there was overlap or not.
So we're working really closely with the broadband office, and we just really think that in the next 5 years, we can actually get the state covered. But it's going to be a challenge. And there was hope that there was going to be a partnership with the state. And, this is not a large amount to lose $10 million, but it sets back the stakeholders. And I think you'll hear from them this afternoon in regards to this bill on LB2.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Our next agency is the Department of Revenue. Good morning, Director.
Good morning, Chairman Clements. Thank you, and members of the Appropriations Committee, for having me here today. My name is James Kamm, Jameskamm. I have the privilege and honor to serve as the Nebraska Tax Commissioner. I'm here today to support for the recommendations being made in LB2 and by Governor Pillen. I have submitted a letter that also states the DOR's support of these changes. I want to be respectful to members of the committee's time today, and so I won't read my letter, which has been being handed out now, being submitted part as the official public record. But I wanted to come here this morning to make myself available to any questions you might have of the Department of Revenue, given the role we play as a state agency in charge of collecting the state's revenues. So
Thank you. Are there questions? Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you for coming. So this 1.6 million, what is your total budget?
I'm going to misstate that if I do, Senator, so I'll have to get back to you on that. I should know that this morning. I apologize, but I will misstate that if I tell you a figure this morning.
So were you contacted in advance about this adjustment?
We worked collaboratively with the budget office this spring to come up with this savings. And basically what this represents, Senator, is it's our unobligated obligation for 23-24 for the current year. And so that is our unobligated portion.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions? Senator Vargas?
Pretty quick, sort of following up on Senator Erdman. If this was not to pass, are you going to make this adjustment anyway and propose it for next year and cut?
Well, what I understand, Senator Vargas, and as you know, I'm fairly new in my role yet, is coming up on a year, not as new as I used to be, so I can't use that excuse anymore. But from what I understand in the past, we've carried over our budget, our excess unobligated portion from one year to the next mid-biennium. And then if we still had an unobligated portion at the end of the biennium, then we would come and let you guys know how we'd want to use that money going forward. So we run pretty lean and mean in the Department of Revenue, I can say that. And at this time, that just represents essentially our salary savings that we have over the course of a year. So we're anticipating that for 24-25 as well, although there were some one-time costs that we incurred this year that we won't incur for 24-25.
It sounds like, the conversation I had previously with Lee Will, I'm still concerned that you thinking about the carryover and still determining how we might use those funds is not the direction that the administration is heading. Because I'm flagging that for all agencies, because if that's where we're heading, that's where we're heading. But I just wanted to know whether or not you were going to do these cuts, even if this doesn't pass, and propose them next year. And I don't know if you can answer.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you on that today. So I just know that we have contributed the 1.6 and what was unobligated this year and what you guys appropriated and what we had in excess. And again, that is salary savings that the agency realizes over the course of a fiscal year.
Other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Director.
Yes, thank you for having me today.
Next is Department of Agriculture. We have a representative from the Department of Agriculture. I believe we had a letter from, we had a letter from them. All right. Next is Department of Banking. Is there a representative? Oh, that's right. We had a letter from them also. Very good. All right. State Fire Marshal would be next. Senator Urban?
I have a question that maybe it's inappropriate. It's past the agriculture presentation. At the bottom of that, the 300,000 from the corn checkoff.
Oh, we'll discuss that in committee.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we've had comments about that.
Yeah, thank you.
And there'll be public comments after we go through the agencies available also. Okay, all right,
Thanks. Glad it wasn't directed toward me. I couldn't have answered.
good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Doug Hobein, Boughohbein. I am the Assistant State Fire Marshal. State Fire Marshal Scott Cordes is out of the state at a previously scheduled conference and cannot be here to speak to you today. The State Fire Marshal Agency is charged with enforcing all laws regarding the suppression of arson, investigation of cause, origin, and circumstances of fires, to promote safety, to reduce loss by fire, to make an investigation for fire safety of premises and facilities. There are numerous programs associated with these duties to ensure the safety of the public. The agency was requested to find ways to accomplish these duties while reducing the amount of general funds appropriated to the agency. LB2 has a reduction of $250,000 of general fund reappropriation in fiscal year 23-24 and $3.5 million in the general fund appropriation to the agency for fiscal year 24-25, leaving a base general fund appropriation of $328,392. There's also a corresponding increase of $3.5 million to the cash fund appropriation, resulting in a total cash fund appropriation of $7,376,891. The State Fire Marshal's impact in LB3 shows the removal of set fee amounts for various services the agency provides. With these removals, the agency will be able to set fee amounts at levels necessary to pay for the direct and indirect costs of performing all duties of the agency. Thank you for your time and attention today. I'll be happy to address any of your questions.
Any other questions? Senator Dorn.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you for being here. And maybe I'm misunderstanding all of what's kind of going on here in the fire marshal aspect of it. Some funds are going to be pulled back, or you're pulling back.
Correct.
But to replace those funds, now you're going to increase fees.
Correct. Yes, that is the intention. Yes.
So who's going to be paying most of those fees?
It'll be the people that utilize our services for the most part. We do licensure inspections, those that request licenses, buildings that are built, they pay for a plan review. Those are the main sources of our income for the fees that we charge.
So if in your fee structure, are you not at the top of what you can be at a fee structure? You're just filling that in, or are you just, I guess I'm trying to understand how your department gets to change the fees, or if they're supposed to come in front of the legislature or not. I guess that's my question.
I guess that is a good question, and those are things that need to be answered. The intent is for us to be able to set the fees where we need them to be able to operate as an agency and fulfill our needs fiscally. So I'm not sure if that is a complete answer, but that is the best I can give you this time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So with removal, are the fees set in statute currently?
Many of them are, yes.
And then those will be removed. So if they're not set statutorily,
Right.
are you able to just then move them whenever you need to move them?
But yes, to move to a regulatory process to set them to where we need them to be, yes.
And my last question would simply be, would any of those fees that you're talking about be imposed on local fire departments or volunteer fire departments?
They will not, no. There's no change to that. We don't charge for any of the training we provide now, and there's no change to that proposed. Yeah, you're welcome.
Senator.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Give me an example of some fees you may raise to
Okay.
make up the revenue.
Someone who applies for a license, we do inspections for daycares and liquor licenses. We inspect healthcare facilities. But the biggest portion of our fees right now is probably through plan reviews for buildings that are being built across the state. An example right now, we have a baseline of $2.50 that we collect for a plan review fee. That doesn't cost, basically does not cover our cost to receive the fees, let alone review them and have inspections conducted. So we feel maybe a change to those fees might be necessary to help fund the agency.
So could you make those changes now?
We made a change not too long ago to simplify them, but we are working forward with this LB2 and LB3 in mind to make the changes to address these issues.
So if LB2 and 3 don't pass, you're going to make those changes anyway?
We will see where we go from there. That is a good question that we don't know the answer to right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I had a question. Do you know how long it's been since you raised your fees?
We had to change to our fee schedule for plan reviews. That was probably 3 years ago, but otherwise it's been 15 years, maybe longer than that, with any changes to our fees.
And $2.50 per square foot? Or
No, it's
per
a flat
review?
fee, a flat
Per
fee
review.
of $2.50. That starts there and it does go up, but it's a flat fee of $2.50. Yeah.
Well, we as senators are being paid $5.74 an hour. And, you could at least come up to that, I think. But seeing no other questions, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Next agency would be Department of Insurance. Is there a representative? Seeing none. Department of Health and Human Services is next. Good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Steve Corsi, Stevecorsi, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer for the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm here to testify in support of LB2 and LB3. Division of Developmental Disabilities and Division of Behavioral Health Director Tony Green and Division of Public Health Director Charity Menifee are also here today and available to answer any specific questions about their divisions that I might not have the details on. On February 12th, DHHS testified before this committee regarding our mid-biennium budget request. At that time, DHHS made a commitment that we would aggressively continue identifying areas where we can reduce costs and improve the quality of services to Nebraskans. I am here today to share an update on that promise. Over the past 5 months, the department has engaged in an ongoing effort with Governor Pillen to refine our budget in ways that will better serve Nebraskans through fiscal responsibility. I would like to highlight a few important components of the budget recommendations that emphasize DHHS's commitment to the most vulnerable Nebraskans. Specifically, the department is dedicated to providing children in the foster care system the best possible care based on individual needs. We are increasing our utilization of Title IV funds to assist in this effort. The department is leveraging additional federal funds in the following programs to support children and families: maternal home visiting, support for pregnant and parenting youth, food banks and the summer EBT program, early childhood programs, child advocacy centers, and CASA programs. The department is also dedicated to improving timely services to individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities as our efforts to eliminate the DD waitlist continue. In LB2, you will see the Division of Public Health has identified savings related to the modernization of the vital records system, as well as unspent funds in the Sync Health Information Exchange budget. Excess in the Sync Health budget is due to an increase in federal fund claiming with no change in contractual services. I want to thank Governor Pillen for his leadership and for working with the department on these efforts. We respectfully request that the committee advance both bills to general file. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'd be happy to answer questions on these bills.
Other questions? Senator Wisher?
Thank you for being here today. I do have a question on, I was trying to find it here on my notes, on the public assistance aid reduction. My understanding is that in 2023, we had over $80 million in aid needs. And so what reduction would do was put us under that. My question is, this is an aid program, which means it's need-based. How has the department contemplated the potential that we actually will exceed in needs what the Appropriations Committee and the Legislature might be providing you in a budget should we pass?
Senator, if I think I understand your question correctly. If I don't, then please restate. But I think you're saying if we're going to make these reductions, how are we going to pay for those needs that were previously identified? Is that basically the question?
Yes, my understanding is in 2022, I've got so many sheets in front of me. That's why yes, here we go. In 2021 and 2022, our needs were approximately 71 million, but in 2023, they were nearly 88 million. And my concern is that we would be, for program 347, we may have more aid than we would have available in dollars should we take this decrease.
So, Senator Wishart, thanks for the question. 347 is the Office of Economic Assistance. And I can tell you that there are no changes in services for any of the programs in that office: child care, LIHEAP, SNAP, ADC, and ongoing. Let's see here. What I can tell you, I don't have a note in front of me specifically about that, but I can tell you that in any of the reductions that we're doing in the department, there is no reduction in services anywhere. And in fact, as I mentioned in my testimony that I gave you a copy of, there are a number of places where we're increasing services across the board, multiple. In fact, I don't know what that total is. I don't have it with me, but if I totaled that up, I'm looking at some notes right here, 14 million, 22 million, another 22 million, 3 million, and 1.5 million. So that's 44, 47, 61, about 62.5 million just in the Office of Economic Assistance in increases in services and help and aid to families and kids. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, and I think what I'd like to do is just follow up with your team on this one in particular.
Yeah.
I'm most concerned about a cash flow issue in particular with this department since it's need-based. And we've seen a difference in need over the last 3 years. And so just making sure you'd only have 2.6 million remaining in carryover for this program for the remainder of the year. So just want to talk through what happens if there's additional need.
Sure, we would be happy to work with you in your office. Yes, ma'am.
Senator Vargas.
Thank you very much, Director Corsi. And yeah, I have some similar questions, and I just want to dig a little deeper because my concern is that we have a projected revenue deficit into this next biennium. And public assistance aid, these lapses in aid are based off of need. And I understand finding efficiencies with operations, but for the aid programs, if the projected need, which is still staying the same, actually actualizes in future years when we don't have money to pay for it, we won't have the money to fund any requests. And there have been requests. We've increased child welfare aid in mid-biennium adjustments, millions, tens of millions of dollars to address the need. And that is a sweeping change in having to do 20 or 30, $40 million and more aid in the middle of a budget. It's a lot of money. So have you projected out, do you have the flexibility to respond within their existing budget and aid to meet, if we actually fully actualize the need in aid, like, do you have the flexibility to meet that need without asking us for more money again when we don't have the money?
So Senator Vargas and Senator Wishart, as I answer his question, I think it will provide you more clarity on the question you asked as well, ma'am. I think the answer to that, Senator Vargas, is yes. At the present moment, we don't foresee any shortfalls in funding. In fact, we, as I mentioned to Senator Wishart, we're expanding what we're doing in a number of areas. And the comment that I wanted to make that I think will help you as well, Senator Wishart, is that one of the ways that we're able to do this, the primary way that we're able to do this, is by leveraging federal funds. The governor has made very clear that he wants to capture every federal dollar that we can in the state of Nebraska. And we've gone after those aggressively, and we're going to continue to do that. And we're bringing in substantially more in federal funding in a number of places than we were before. So
it still doesn't address, I mean, I appreciate the answer, the response. It still doesn't address that you're cutting aid and it's based on projected need, and then, or lapsing aid or cutting public assistance. And if need increases in a future year, you're going to be requesting from this Appropriations Committee more general funds to backfill. And we won't have the funds, you know, especially if the other bills and revenue pass, we definitely won't have the funds. This is the reason why I'm concerned about long-term sustainability of services, because even though you say we can meet the services now, that is dependent on need and people using them. And so I would like to see more of a plan on that in the long term, because I'm not hearing that there is a plan, just that we can cover the services now based off the current need, and that's different. Those are two different things.
Senator Vargas, I would respectfully disagree that there is a plan. I would be happy to share a plan with you. I would tell you that going back to former colleague's testimony, Kristen Cox, this morning, that as we continue to look at the department through the lens of system improvement, one of the tenets of system improvement, as you heard her testify, is that there is 25% hidden capacity in any given system. And as we have dug into our system, we're finding places with hidden capacity. That as you do that and you improve services over time, you'll have fewer people on services, typically, because you're improving services and you're increasing your flow through the system in safe and appropriate ways. That's a given. Don't want to alarm anybody. That's always the given. You do everything through that lens. But as we get better at what we do, we have additional opportunity, like getting better at claiming federal funds. We have additional opportunity to provide additional services. I am absolutely not concerned about the future for services for the people of Nebraska through DHHS, and truly would be happy to sit down with you and have that conversation.
No, I appreciate that. And I look forward to having the conversation. And again, the reason I'm concerned is because we have mid-biennium budgets that ask us to fund more money based off of need. And if we don't have the money, I don't know where we're going to be able to backfill that. One last question, because it has to do with efficiencies and sort of epiphany to some extent. For DD services, for example, for the wait list, and I'm prefacing this also for Director Green, so apologies. How do we plan to eliminate the wait list without providing additional funding? What is the plan for that?
So we could certainly have Director Green come up to answer that in a lot more detail. I made a few notes on that, and I'd be happy to share those with the committee, Senator Vargas. Before March, individuals and families would often wait up to 6 to 8 years for services to support their everyday lives and their needs in the community. Director Green and his team sat down and spent countless hours working on a a plan to eliminate that. And I think the problem goes back 34 years, if I remember correctly. It's been a 34-year problem. And the governor charged us with solving that, by the way. It's number 2 on my list with the governor in getting that solved. So with that in mind, Director Green and his team sat down, sorted through the best way to do that, and what they, Tony can answer more detailed questions, but basically what they came up with was that rather than waiting the 6 to 8 years to be on the comprehensive waiver, we could better serve people here and now if we did evaluations utilizing a clinical team, do evaluations of people's current needs, and then meet those through the family support waiver that we initiated and rolled out in March. The cost for that, the cost to meet people's needs where they're at currently, and then over time bring all, it was approximately at that time, it was about 2,500 people that were on the wait list, to bring them all off. That total cost was about $44.6 million. 18.5 million of that was in general funds, is in general funds, and 26 million in federal funds. For SF or for state fiscal year 25, we can absorb the cost, the increased cost within our existing appropriation using that phased in approach, which goes back to what I just said about meeting people's needs where they're at now, as opposed to the full comprehensive waiver 6 to 8 years out. Does that help? And by the way, let me give you some numbers. They're pretty exciting. So since March, since the rollout, I think it was in the late March, as I recall, 24th or somewhere around there. Anyway, since March, we have offered 650 families the family support waiver. And of those 650, 327, which is about 50%, have accepted. 105 have declined, and the major reason for that is because they are currently on the aged and disabled waiver, and they just wanted to stay with that. And then 218 are pending, which is about 34%. We're awaiting their decision. So I'm pretty excited by those results. It means that right now we have 327 families and individuals that are getting needs met that might not have gotten met for a number more years, and they might have been worse at the time that they were met. Does that help?
It does. I look forward to talking to Director Green about it too. It is good to hear that you can absorb it now. My concern is with the rising cost of services and salaries and for providers that you will be coming back to the Appropriations Committee in a future year and asking us for more money to fund it, also to then leverage federal funds. And the funds may not be there if a lot of these other things are enacted in other committees and including this committee. And that is my concern, the sustainability of this. So I look forward to hearing more.
Appreciate your concerns.
Other questions? Senator Jordan?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you for being here, Director. Of course, on our handout that we got, it was, I call it the biomedical research of $15 million reduction on, that's what we see on here under program 623 or whatever, that comes through your department. Is that the healthcare cash fund, the biomedical part? That's what's shown on our handout, on our sheet from our fiscal. So you don't have the same handout, but I guess my question is that the healthcare cash fund, the biomedical part, the 15 million in reduction of the biomedical that we would take stuff out of general funds, is that under your department then?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it is.
Yes, sir. Senator Dorn, it is.
How was those decisions arrived, or who came up with those decisions to not have us fund out of the healthcare cash fund, the 15 million for biomedical research? Because if there's one thing I've gotten emails on, it's this one here, right here.
Sure.
That we have had a massive amount, or in the billions, over $1 billion of additional funding for research. And many people are coming to the state of Nebraska to our research facilities because of the funding that we were able to acquire, and that some of them have really concerns about if going forward that we can maintain what we have done. I have multiple emails about that. And I guess, how was that decision? Were you part of it, or is that a question I have to ask somebody else later?
Well,
I think we will shake it. Yeah.
Which way did he shake his head? What did he say?
I said, after the committee hearing, I can talk to Senator Dorn.
Senator Dorn, I was part of that decision. I don't know all of the details of that, but I can give you some generalities. I can tell you that 15 million that's eliminated is about 11 million to the state university system. Then it's about 4 million to the Creighton University Boys Town Research Hospital. It's also estimated that Nebraska Medical Center, as a result of the provider assessment, that Nebraska Medical Center will receive approximately an additional 146 million, and Boys Town will receive an additional 30 million from that same provider assessment. While we can't, as a department, and wouldn't dictate how the medical facilities handle additional dollars, it could be within their means to decide to support research activities through funding those systems. So, and if you want additional details,
We need additional information.
yeah, we can
We'll have
do
discussion in
that
our
either
committee.
with Director Menifee or after the committee.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions? We'd like to have Director Green, if you would, we have some questions evidently.
Can I ask one question before he leaves?
Excuse me.
I'm going to blame Senator Dorn because he brought this up about the biomedical research and also this funding. In our time in these 8 years, I haven't seen us use the healthcare cash fund to fund aid programs like this. What is the rationale behind this? Because the healthcare cash fund on its own may be sustainable. Right now, we've had sustainability issues. If we start moving funds to fund aid programs for need from cash funds that are not sustainable, we may not have money in the future, and we'll have to backfill that with general funds, which Erdman hates. So, like, we have to think about, so what was the rationale behind starting to use healthcare cash funds to fund DDA?
Senator Vargas, I think I would hesitate to speculate on the rationale. I'd want to go back and dig into that a little bit. I'm sure Lee Will has a response to that, a reasoned and rational response to that. I don't have that off the top of my head, but in my mind, it does go back to the aggressive leveraging of federal dollars. But I'm sure Lee has a much better response.
I'll talk to you afterwards about it because we can't get in the record. We got to get in the record. All right, thank you.
Any others? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Green?
Good morning, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Tony Green, T-O-N-Y-G-R-E-E-N. I'm the Director for the Division of Developmental Disabilities and the Interim Director for the Division of Behavioral Health. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Senator Vargas?
I already gave you a precursor to this. So basically, you talked to me about, the ending to the wait list. What is the plan, given that you're not asking for increasing funding? I mean, we've seen examples of, and it's, apples and oranges, but Pennsylvania's putting hundreds of millions of dollars towards ending their wait list. And I'm trying to connect the dots. How are we ending the wait list to maintain quality services and make sure that we're also paying for services adequately, thinking ahead, without adding significantly more funds to that?
Yeah, so I'll first kind of go back to the announcement of the elimination of the waiting list that the governor did back in March, and did make a commitment that going forward in the estimates that we've put together, that there would be potentially an $18 million investment into that. We've started the process in March with the family support waiver, which was already funded in previous legislation. And so as we move further into the plan, Those will be conversations that we'll continue to have. We're obviously working on the next biennium budget to see what that would look like if there's opportunity for funding. Specific to this request that's before us today, I would point out that the actual positive net impact for the Developmental Disability Division by moving state general funds and switching that and replacing it with cash funds is that becomes a permanent base for DD. So it actually has a net gain for us in DD of $8 million that can be used towards that wait list as step one.
And that's sort of my second question then, because, and you're talking about like the healthcare cash fund.
Correct.
change. We have had sustainability issues with the healthcare cash fund in the past, because it's really dependent on how well the market does to some extent. It's all dependent on whether or not new senators bring more bills to try to look at it. And I understand that's going to happen into the future. And so it's not sustainable on its own. We can't always rely on it. That's why we rely on the general fund, because there is a sustainability, at least right now, from taxpayers to be able to fund services. So what is the rationale behind making that move? Because it is a concern I have. It's a concern.
Yeah, I would say I would probably echo what CEO Corsi said, and I mean, Lee can certainly articulate the thought process there. But in this specific case of the transfer of trying to come up with how we can best utilize our resources and free up state general funds when appropriate, this seemed to be a viable option, which also had a positive impact to the base budget of DD by replacing the cash funds as opposed to letting it lapse.
Okay.
So, and then if you want me to, so the larger waiver cost, and there's more information we're continuing to share with stakeholders, but I think the key piece that folks need to understand as well is that this really is a different approach to how we're tackling the waiting list, right? The previous approach was everybody waited, as Steve had mentioned, without any services for lengths of time. And then you went into the most expensive waiver and utilized the services. This new approach starts all the way back at the beginning. I'm proud to say in the beginning of July, we started offering Medicaid as a supplementary insurance program to all children that qualify for developmental disability services. That's one approach that started kind of meeting people's needs right away. That hopefully will prolong maybe a need for moving into that deeper end services. We have the family support waiver that launched in March. And so when you look at the cost in the previous estimates where we've been together many years where we looked at how do we eliminate this wait list, and it was always the single focused approach to say number of folks times the cost of the comprehensive waiver, and that's what it's going to cost us to get rid of it. And this approach says, let's do this differently. Let's say some of those folks are just going to want Medicaid, and that will meet their family's needs. Some will just want the family support waiver, and that will meet their needs, and the day waiver at 21, and so on. And so it really is taking the available resources that we have today and spreading them out across everybody. And with some folks choosing to go into lower categories, it allows those that need that deeper end service to move into that based on need versus a date of application.
Can you do what you just said without this $8 million transfer from biomedical research to DD?
Not the entire elimination of the wait list, no.
Will you be requesting more general funds next biennium to be able to meet this wait list plan?
I would say we're in process of developing that budget now.
Okay. I appreciate you, Director / Interim Director, hybrid, and thank you.
Senator Wishart.
Thank you for being here. I want to turn to behavioral health aid. So a couple of questions on this.
Okay.
First is I know that the department is working with the U.S. Department of Justice on sort of looking at how we support individuals so that they aren't, those with mental health issues or behavioral health issues aren't continuing to sort of be institutionalized in terms of care. How is that work going to be able to continue with a lapse of 8 million in funding for behavioral health?
So that work is in process right now. So what I can say is, DOJ has issued their findings, and we are in the process of negotiations with DOJ on how to resolve those issues. And we're also putting together the fiscal component to fixing those concerns, right? So obviously, some of that will involve services for folks that might not be receiving services today, case management as well. And so the short answer would be, again, we're working on the next biennium budget. This lapse that's referred to in this request of state general funds would not have an impact on that.
Okay. And then can you just walk me through, and I know we discussed this in our last budget hearing, why do we continue to see unspent funds in behavioral health?
It's a complicated question, and one that I think we were actually having a conversation earlier this week about needing to get the messaging correct, right? And so when we talk about the behavioral health division and its funding, it's a narrow slice of the pie, if you will, of the larger behavioral health picture. And so one of the things that you're seeing is a decline in the number of folks who are accessing services through the regions. Doesn't mean they're not accessing behavioral health services, but when we did Medicaid expansion, a large number of those folks who previously had been getting their services from behavioral health providers funded through the regions are now having those services funded through Medicaid. And so in total, we've actually seen a 31% decrease in the number of folks that are getting services funded out of the behavioral health region. Again, I don't want you to take that to say that there are 31% less folks getting behavioral health. That's not what I'm trying to articulate, but from that specific funding source. What we haven't done a good job is really taking what is happening then on the Medicaid side and bringing all of the behavioral health system together. And we're going to work on getting that taken care of here shortly, because I think it is confusing to look at. But historically, prior to COVID and Medicaid expansion, the regions were pretty on point with the spend of what was happening. And then over the last several years, that's continued to grow. And this year, we lapsed in 24, 18 million. And so this 8 million reduction technically is still leaving 10 million in the biennium if something would need to change or additional needs would surface between now and June of 25.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Vargas?
Sync Health, Health Information Exchange budget. Have you talked with them about their ability to absorb some of the services in this cut?
I have not.
Okay.
Anyone else here? Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Did the committee have any other HHS questions? Seeing none, that will conclude Health and Human Services. Next agency is Department of Veterans Affairs. Is there a Veterans Affairs representative? Seeing none. Did I skip one? No, okay. Department of Natural Resources would be next. Is there a Department of Natural Resources representative? We'll go on. The Military Department, is there a representative? Well, seeing none. Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. And after that would be Corrections. Welcome, Director. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Clements and members of the committee. My name is Timothy McCoy, Timothy McCoy, and I'm the Director of the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission at 2200 North 33rd Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. Thank you for the opportunity to share the Commission's concerns and thoughts about LB2 and LB3. As you heard earlier from a question asked of Lee Will, in LB2 Section 21, we are requesting a change, and that would be rather than removing all of the general funds, which is over $1 million from that program, leaving 100, we would request 125,000 in general fund authority and to retain in that base, and then obviously make that change in reducing the cash fund authority that was shifted over. The reason for this is we receive over $25 million from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We also receive other federal funds that pass through our agency, like the Federal Land and Water Conservation Funds and Federal Recreation Trail Program, where we pass funds to local state government, state entities and government for improvements that they apply for grants for. Through those, we have to do an allocation and shared services plan to be eligible, ensure our eligibility for federal funding. And part of that is to ensure that we are not spending our agency funds that are tied specifically to Fish and Wildlife Service from Game Cash and Parks Cat or Habitat Cash, that we're not applying those funds to things that aren't eligible. For eligible uses. And those eligible uses are also identified in each one of our funding programs. So when this came out after our first visit and this came out in the bill, we sat down with our federal aid folks and my budget folks and drilled down into what's the minimum we need to comply with the requirements. They came up with $125,000. We would request that's the reason we'd like that to stay in there. I would also note there's already within the bill there will also be $100,000 in carryover funds of general funds in program 337 that are going to be pulled back. We have several different funds that's happening in. From the standpoint of an agency who doesn't have a goal to strive to spend every piece of our budget, we rely largely on cash funds. We have ample carryover in our programs and cash funds that will already carry over that we can do some of our additional work with. None of those general funds were allocated to anything specific. Section 22 would remove general funds entirely from the Parks Administration and Operations budget and increase the cash authority by that amount. So that's pretty significant. When you lump those two programs together, we're looking at about a 66% reduction as written in general funds that come to the Game and Parks Commission. It would be with the shift that we just requested a 65.3% reduction. We really appreciate the governor's proposal that shifts some additional cash funds to the state park cash revolving fund to offset the loss of general funds. And in this current fiscal year, and potentially some of those should be available in the next biennium in the first year. We are concerned looking at the long-term impacts on parks users potentially if we move the park system to a totally fee-focused user pay system. Right now, just the initial estimate in looking at this year's budget in terms of revenues, we need to increase our park permit fees, our camping and lodging fees, and our park activity fees by 26% across the board to make up for that loss. So we always try to look at those carefully. We do not want to price people out of their state park system. The other thing, when we look at our park permit fees, when we look at camping and lodging fees and activities fees, we're also looking at park permit fees within other states that surround Nebraska, some of our competitors. We also look at those same values to try and be competitive in the in-state and out-of-state market with camping and lodging fees and activity fees. So that will be a challenge, but if that's the intent, that's how the state's going to go forward, we will get it done. As part of that, the other thing I would bring up is that we know our park permit fees are at their current caps. We just raised them for calendar year 2014. So we will likely need to bring a bill in future, in the next legislative session to move those caps up again. Those fees were increased by action of our commission and moved it up to the cap, which is $35 for an annual for residents and $70 for non-residents. We really appreciate the clarifications on several of the funds that would identify the ability that the investment earnings would be retained in the funds. Those were all funds that were identified because of connections to the federal funding that we get through the Fish and Wildlife Service. For many of those, we have several other funds. We would request that. The State Park Revolving Fund is the first one. Part of that reason is if in the long term, we're going to be moving to a user fee system in the state park system, it would seem to make sense to be able to protect any additional dollars from our users from the interest being swept to another source so that we can make sure that we're making the promise that their fees and the funds they provide are being used to benefit the park system. Because when we work on larger capital development projects in the park system, we typically are taking time and building up the amounts to do those sorts of projects on top of our annual operating, and taking that interest will slow that progress on certain projects. And we have a few projects that were identified in the current biennium that could impact, including improvements at $4 million each year for improvements at Kiewit Lodge and $10 million each year for projects at Fort Robb. So we're just trying to look forward with that. The other thing that's in park cash is donated funds. We get significant at times. We can get significant donated funds for parks and park improvements. We also seek grants or funds from foundations when we can get them. There's currently $4.05 million in cash funds from donations for the completion of the final venture park projects, which are the aquatic center improvements at Mahoney, fishing improvements at Louisville SRA, and completion of a new classroom and educational stream at Shram SRA. We are a bit concerned that if the intent is interest is going to be pulled off of that we will have a hesitancy to provide us donated funds, which we're required to have the cash funds on hand as a state agency when we enter into any construction project, because we are a cash funded government. And so just want to, that is a concern. The Hunters Helping the Hungry Fund, the only funds that go into that are donations from permit buyers and other donors. And it's for a program that we provide funding to local dollars per whole deer for local lockers that want to participate. We pay them to provide ground donated venison, which then is distributed through food banks. There's no other commissioner state funds that are used within that fund program, and we think it'd be prudent that the interest from those donated dollars stay in there. The Cowboy Trail funds used to help manage and continue development of the Cowboy Trail across northern Nebraska. The funds that are in there that we get as fees are from crossing leases and a few right-of-way leases for the former railroad right-of-way. The fund also currently has donated funds from local groups who are providing funding to help support additional development of the trail in their local areas. And they are very interested in doing that, and several of those same groups are interested in raising money with the long-term goal of completing the trail across northern Nebraska. And again, that same challenge of concern from interest from donors and other granting organizations, if those funds, any funds are sitting there, waiting for the final bills on a project, if the interest will be swept. The last two are the Josh the Outer Fund and Wildlife Education Fund. Those both receive funds from specific license plates. People who purchase those plates pay additional vehicle registration fees that go into those funds. And we hope that sweeping of those funds would not decrease interest in those. But, those were just the primary things that we saw. If there would be an opportunity, if you'd be willing to consider to add those protections to those funds so interest doesn't get swept. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you sort of our thoughts on these two bills. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Senator Erdman.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Thank you for being a Director McCoy. So share with us, what plates do the funds, what do you collect funds from, which plates? Is that the mountain lion plates or?
Yeah, the Wildlife Education Fund comes from the mountain lion plate. And when that plate was developed, they set it up in statute at putting money to the education fund. And the same was with the Josh the Otter Fund, that there's Josh the Otter Be Safe Around Water license plates. Those were also done by the legislature. Those dollars go to that fund for grants to organizations that do work for educational programming about water safety and messaging about water safety.
So it appears because of our so well-designed current plate in the state of Nebraska, that a lot of people are choosing the mountain lion plate. Is that revenue increased?
The mountain lion plate revenue is going down slightly. There were some new wildlife conservation plates that were added probably 3 years ago that have I think they've got a bighorn sheep, a turtle, and a sandhill crane. Those appear to be a little bit more popular, but I would say that from what I know of what we're seeing from revenue, there's been a slight decline in the mountain lion plate, but not quite as many as there were before.
All right. So my next question is about program 336. I see we're going to transfer 250,000 general fund out of that program. You know what the balance is in that 336?
You're talking cash balance right now?
Yeah. Please.
I have it. Let me grab it. Make sure I get your right number because I've been looking at the parks balance for everything right now. Our current balance is about 29.7 million.
And how much did you spend out of that last year, and what did you spend it for?
Our total expenses last year were over 29.9 million.
So how much of that is general fund? Any? That is some, because we're transferring some out.
Oh, you're wanting the program. I'm looking at the fund. I'm sorry. I don't actually have those numbers off the top of my head. There is about, if I remember off the top of my head, there's a little over, close to over 2 million, might be a little over or under right now, in wildlife conservation. That general fund is really tied to two things. Well, three things. The biggest one is law enforcement. Our conservation law enforcement, for the work that they do as partner law enforcement agencies, especially across rural Nebraska, which is being exacerbated. There's probably more going on now than there was, because I know the state patrol is having some challenges in hiring, as are counties.
So there's a significant portion of that comes from Fish and Wildlife?
The majority of the conservation officers comes from game cash funds. And then they also spend, when they are working in the summer, they identify their work for what they're doing. If they're working in parks, it's coming from parks cash funds.
Because in the past, as you well know, I had earmarked 10 million out of that cash fund to pay for wildlife damages. And I was always told that because of the contribution from Fish and Game or whatever else puts money into that was unacceptable to take money out to pay for damages. Have you changed your opinion on that, or is it still the same as it was?
From the perspective of not having a specific program that identifies how that would be done, paying for anything that is payment for wildlife damage can't be done using the federal funds that we're eligible for, and the program would have to be designed very carefully in terms of trying to look at how you would equalize those funds. And then there's the question mark of does that create an untapped issue that continues to go on forever and ever. We have focused our efforts instead on working and hiring depredation biologists to spend more time working with landowners and following up with them. And we continue to add those across the state.
If I remember correctly, several years ago, it was like 14 million came from the federal funds. It was in 336. Does that number sound right?
Within 336, it would be closer right now to, it'd be over 20 million that we're getting in federal funding that we can utilize. That's reimbursed. That's, those are grants, so it's reimbursable. So anything that we do in fisheries and wildlife that's eligible for that, we can get reimbursement for. Law enforcement activities, because they are enforcement, are not eligible for reimbursement from those.
Okay. But we don't know for sure that if we did wildlife damages out of that account, that it would affect game and park or the fish and wildlife contribution. It's our estimate or opinion.
It would have to be done in a program developed by the agency that specifically identifies how it meets the long-term goals for population management for Nebraska.
So it'd be quite obvious. We have to know how many animals we have before we could manage those. Would that be correct?
We always have estimates of our number of animals. We don't have exact estimates, and I know we disagree on what some of those are.
So the fish improvement program in the state of Nebraska, most of the lakes that I attend are like the Dead Sea. There's no fish. So what is the goal to enhance fishing or the opportunity to catch fish in the state of Nebraska? Because we're missing a great opportunity for tourism by not having fish in our lakes.
We continue to stock fish around the state in all public waters every year. Our biologists are looking at those waters and making stocking recommendations every year. We also finally got some authority here just starting for this fiscal year to enhance our hatchery work a little more with more ponds being lined at North Platte. We've saw great increases in our productivity and our fish growth in those ponds, the ones we've lined. So we look forward to that. We're also planning for a facility to do a more of an inside recirculating facility at Valentine. And that's part of the design that we're working on. We're getting ready to do an RFP for right now to look into the future. If we're able to do things through that system where we do some species that we don't stock a lot of, that we could actually raise them in those RAS systems and free up pond space. And then there's some other species that we could do like largemouth bass and species that are really, really popular. In a lot of our smaller lakes and cities, they just get fished out. We can actually produce and grow fish over the winter, which would make a huge difference for us because typically winter growth in ponds is pretty minimal with fish.
So in your analysis and research of these lakes, do you find that it is in agreement with me that we're not catching the fish we used to?
I think, I don't know if it's the fish you're used to. We see good catch rates across the state. If it's a specific lake or a specific thing you're trying to catch, I'd love to know that.
Okay.
We can talk about that.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Senator Dover?
Just talking about fishing and people not catching fish. Do you think that the increase in technology, I mean, it's like unbelievable from the time I was a child, right? Do you think that that's putting pressure and some people are catching more fish instead of catching less fish, or not necessarily? Or
There's actually a couple of states that are starting studies to look at especially some of this more advanced sonar that is forward-facing sonar and their ability to basically specifically find fish and catch them and pretty much see them at the same time. We've not nobody's yet gone down that road of trying to deal with that technology, but we do think there can continue to be advancements in fishing and fishing technology and all sorts of different gear. So we may have some species that are seeing higher catch rates than we have in the past.
I had a question. You talked about you might need a 26% fee increase to make up for the general fund loss. And I didn't catch, when was your last fee increase?
The last parks permit fee increased, we just increased it in 2023 for this calendar year, 2024. So we're at the cap now. The other thing with park permits, like our other permits, there's restrictions on how fast we can move those in statute. We can move them up to 6% a year. You can carry up to 3 years. So the maximum you could ever do would be 18% if you haven't carried it 3 years. So that'll take time. We also we're planning, actually in October, we were already planning on this. We are planning on bringing some updated within park fees to our commission because they can change those, especially looking at some of our lodging offerings, because we think that in some cases we've got newer lodging, some of the bigger cabins that we're probably a little bit under the market, and looking at moving those up to kind of match what's going on with our competition.
Very good. Senator Erdman?
Thank you, Senator Clements. That brings up another question I had. So in statute, are you able to charge out-of-state people more than in-state on park permits?
On what?
Park permits?
Yes, by statute, it's 2 times the resident rate now. That was something that then Senator Hughes got done in the legislature.
So I believe Colorado has a permit cost of $93. Is that an understanding you have?
My understanding is they raised both their resident and their non-resident fees.
And we're at what, 45?
We're at 35 for residents, 70 for non-residents right now.
So perhaps we ought to charge Colorado people 93 if theirs is 93?
Well, if we will run into issues with the federal land and water conservation program, and actually the federal entities that own some of the reservoirs we manage, if we go above that 2 times the resident fee. So I'm pretty sure that Colorado's is that they raise the resident fee and their non-resident is twice that.
Because if they're charging 93 for residents and non-residents, and we charge 93, they're sure not going to go to Colorado for the same price. So anyway, something to think about.
Yep.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Director.
Thank you.
I had announced that we're going to take a break at noon, but we have corrections here, I see. I'd like to go ahead and have corrections, and then we'll have a lunch break after that. Director, you're welcome to come. Okay. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
All right, so good morning, Chairman Clements and members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Rob Jeffries, R-O-B-J-E-F-F-R-E-Y-S. And I'm the director of Nebraska Department of Correctional Services, NDCS. I'm here today to speak about how NDCS proposes to meet the $10 million budget reduction plan for our agency. The work at NDCS, and in line with our strategic planning, is identified by 4 categories: people, programs, policy, and physical plan. Our plan to meet this budget reduction focuses on the efficiencies and leveraging federal funds and state funds as we work to develop our people, follow sound correctional policies, and invest in our physical plan while ensuring our services remain robust and effective, providing programming opportunities for population to develop tools and skills to successfully re-enter into their communities. We have identified opportunities for cost savings, particularly in the areas of health services, purchasing, and innovative use of technology. To give you an example, between utilization of federal funds in healthcare services and increased the volume of purchasing of food, our agency has been able to generate nearly $6 million in cost savings alone in FY 2024. Similar strategies are being used again in FY 2025 to meet or surpass those numbers in those particular categories. Our strategies in our physical plan, we have been able to utilize or increase and maximize the use of 309 funds. Full implementation of electronic purchasing processes, for quality assurance, and increased sharing of resources between facilities to reduce the utilization of contract services. With these strategies outlined in our strategic plan, NDCS met the proposed cost savings for FY 2024. We plan to meet these again in 2025 without impacting services. As correction, it is our mission. We are continuing to look for innovative ways to best reach our population and enhance the likelihood of successful reentry into their communities. We have embraced this same approach in reaching the cost-saving goals by delivering quality service to NDCS population and to the citizens of Nebraska. That is my opening testimony, and I'm open for questions at this particular time.
Other questions? Senator Erdmann.
Thank you for coming. If you would talk about maximizing funds from the 309. Do you know about that?
Excuse me again?
The 309?
Yes.
You're maximizing the funds from that? Can you explain that?
Absolutely. One of the things that we have identified in our strategic planning is the physical plan, ensuring that we are being very mindful and improving the living area and working area for our people. So this past year, we were able to allocate at least $1 million at the end of fiscal year 2024 to augment some of those general revenue services. I mean, some of those renovations. In particular, we had something at Tecumseh that was about $430,000, and a project in NCYF with a roof replacement, which was a 50-50 funding. So about 309 contributed about $675,000 on that. And so it was a $1 million allocated last year for 2024, and we anticipate an additional $1 million this coming year. So it'll be $2 million that we will look to go ahead and offset some of those costing.
Thank you.
Senator Vargas.
Thank you again for being here. It's good to hear about the reductions. Will you tell me are any of this $10 million in reductions going to reduce or eliminate vacancies or reduce the number of staff or salaries?
No, absolutely not.
So all salaries, all the increases that we've funded and you've negotiated, they're going to be fully actualized. We're not eliminating any vacancies that currently exist.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so in my opening testimony, I talked about we're able to attain several, federal funding opportunities to streamline some of our processes and to increase the efficiency of the way we're conducting business, in particular with healthcare services. In partnership with HHS, my partners who just spoke earlier, electronic health records. We've been able to collaborate with them to make that more streamlined. So that's more efficiency right there. Medicaid, with the expansion of Medicaid, I mean, we've been able to save with Medicaid expansion and with our increased volume purchasing of food, we've been able to save about $6 million, that's 70% of that $10 million. So a lot of the things we're doing is more efficient. We're not cutting anything. We're being more efficient moving forward. It's like avoidance of cost as we continue to go forward, as we streamline some of the processes here.
That's helpful. I just want to make sure we're prioritizing public safety, and we've tried to fund these vacancies. So that's great to hear. And really good to hear that Medicaid expansion is affecting positively your agency and correctional services. Last question in regards to federal funds, and we've heard this from other agencies, which were being more leveraging federal funds. There may or may not be a new administration, and with cost cutting that happens in federal, how sustainable are these federal funds that you're now leveraging to find savings for us? Because it's still taxpayer money, and I want to make sure we're sustainable as possible as a state.
Well, to talk about some of the healthcare efficiencies, some of the federal funding that we are receiving is like startup programs, like as I spoke about with the electronic health records. So once we get that up and running, that's going to make us more efficient. So that was a purchase. I mean, a one-time, allotment. As far as Medicaid, however Medicaid goes, the country will go. So we're going to be in line with what the country is receiving as far as Medicaid, the services for our population, and it also helps them upon their reentry back into the community. As far as telemedicine, I mean, it's the same thing as the country will go, so will the corrections department will go as well too, because those are some of the services that everybody's receiving in the community. And so we want to match what the community is receiving as well too. So I hope nothing happens with Medicaid, just like everybody else. There's one particular program that we had a great opportunity, and let me be remiss if I didn't speak about the great medical team that we have that's been able to, we got a new doctor, Dr. Lovelace, who has been very instrumental in identifying some of these cost savings as it relates to federal funding. In particular, one that I want to mention is a 340B pharmacy pricing plan. That is huge for us. And so we just started that here in July of this year. So we have not seen those fundings yet, but it's projected up to be about $300,000, $500,000 a year because of the pricing will be compatible with, across the board with, low pricings that other communities are impacted or low income families are receiving as well too. So that's going to be huge. And that's sustainability as well too. As far as, does that help answer your questions? Okay. I mean, I can go on about some of the things we're doing with the federal fundings because we took it very, wholeheartedly to address some of the expectations from the governor about there's federal fundings that can help us to make us better and make us more efficient. We want to go ahead and seek those fundings as much as we can.
Senator McDonald, you have a question?
Yes. Thank you for being here. Percent of authorized strength, where are you at right now with personnel?
Excuse me.
90% authorized strength. Where are you at with personnel right now? 95%? How many short are you based on employees?
How many vacancies?
Yes.
Oh, okay. We're about protective services, which is our correction officers, our sergeants, and caseworkers and everything. We're at about operating at about a 12% to a 13% vacancy rate. So to put that in context, we got about 1,484 correction officers. So that vacancy rate is about equivalent to about 180, 185 positions. Now that's not, when I say 12%, it's not very fair because I have 9 prisons, but it's mostly impacting our 3, most mission-driven facilities, Tecumseh, RTC, and NSP.
So what's the outlook look like for retaining, recruiting personnel?
Well, there's 2 ways we're going about this. One is another cost saving initiative is some of these facilities, we have 3 facilities by each other, right? So one of the things we're doing as an agency is we're going to start right-sizing those particular complexes and everything so we can share resources. So that is something that we're going to be initiating going forward. Like we're going to start that. We just started it in Omaha with the juvenile and the work release camp. Now that's under one administration, right? And so we can share the resources. So that right there is a great return on investment because we'll be able to share resources and contract services as well too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Others? Seeing none. Thank you for your testimony. And that we're going to take a break now till 1 o'clock. We'll be back at 1 o'clock. Thank you.